Hello. Welcome
Yo,
to this live. Hello.
What up, Prez?
what's up, man? Did Schwinn die? We don't have the. It says we're live, but it doesn't have the little.
Yeah, I think Schwinn is having some laptop issues, so we can go ahead and get started. Thanks for
Alright.
joining, Prez. Shut the fuck up and talk.
Leon the goat. Let's just start. Let's. We here. We finally made it. The notification hit my phone like a fucking megaton bomb. My goodness.
That's a shams bomb. Yeah, I mean, you got to be doing that Walter White thing, right? I won.
I am shocked at the timing.
Well, I thought that if it was going to happen, this would be how it happened. Like, I didn't think, like, if you think about it, right, I don't think they were going to move on unless they had a very clear idea of who's next. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. And you know, for all we say about like, oh, interviews, blah blah blah. Look at that. This is so momentous that Schwinn got the fresh cut, the lineup, all that ready to go.
I've had the fresh cut, pal. Watch your pod. Watch your pod, pal.
Tune into your pod, pal. No, I think that's right. And I think, like, you know, the combination of, like, what do we always say about these guys, right? They keep it fucking tight. We don't hear shit for the most part. Motherfuckers are not plugged in. And then with what you said, where they tend to be pretty decisive. They don't waffle, right? They're like, okay, we lost iHeart. We're gonna pivot like a motherfucker, right? Like, when they make a decision, like, that's a big deal. They don't half step. They fucking go with 2 feet and go with confidence. So that's a good point.
It's also, yeah, and these moves, I think, you very rarely see them make moves in isolation, right? It's tough, especially in hindsight, to look at the Mikel trade and the Cat trade and Hartenstein, all of that being, they were clearly going through all these scenarios. So my guess is they have someone in mind. And if they didn't, I think that they weren't going to fire him after a week, right? They have all the information. You know, we were saying, you know, they're taking time to evaluate the team. I think they probably wanted some information from the players that was candid. But you know, we heard CP say last a couple weeks ago, and we know he's well informed that Tibbs isn't exactly safe if things don't go well. And you know, so I don't want to say the tea leaves have been there. It's always shocking to hear news like this. This was the most successful Knicks season in a very long time. And we know they're very analytically driven, and you know, yeah. I mean, Schwinn, I definitely want to get your reaction. Straight up.
What's your take? What was your gut reaction when you saw it, Schwinn?
My gut reaction is that I wasn't that taken aback. One, I think it's worth saying, like, we've all been really critical of Tom Thibodeau at times. I've also said unequivocally he's done a really good job with the Knicks. He's been a part of their turnaround. I don't think anybody can take that away from him. But I thought, without addressing the coaching staff in a real way, and I think, like, you know, not just addressing the coaching staff, but empowering assistants in a way that Tibbs generally has not kind of done, that you were kind of limited with how far you could go. And I know that sounds weird considering they just got to Eastern Conference Finals. But my feeling was throughout the season, and even despite the Eastern Conference Finals run, was there was stuff that was left on the table. And I didn't think they pushed their ceiling as far as they could have. I didn't think the group's talent was maximized. I think, yes, he got the best out of certain players, individuals, but I did not think the collective was getting maximized. And I pulled up this comment from Kevin Danishevsky because I think it's important. In order to maintain roster flexibility and continuity, you had to make this move. That might be confusing to some people, but you might be interested to know, when this news broke, me and Stacey were recording the pod, and I was just about to make this point. My feeling was that, and I have it, take it for what it is, from things I've heard and just watching the team and you know, obviously all the stuff that we've seen going on in the media and stuff, I did not think Karl-Anthony Towns, and definitely not Mikal Bridges were very happy with their roles this season, how they were used. I think to a lesser extent that applies to OG Anunoby as well. And honestly, despite playing the good soldier in public, I don't know that Josh Hart was thrilled about being put in the position that he was being put in for the entirety of the season. And again, like to an even lesser extent, I think a guy like Deuce McBride, who he might seem like small potatoes to fans and whoever, but this is a guy who's going to be extension eligible after next season. And if you're him and you just went through this whole season where you're like, I just don't seem to be, nothing I do seems to matter. When I play well, it doesn't matter. If I play bad, then it does matter and I get my minutes cut. Like, that's really, really frustrating. And it just felt like as the season went on and very much towards the end of it, aside from Jalen Brunson, I don't know how many allies Tom Thibodeau had in that locker room. And even with Brunson, it's like, what's he going to do? Is he going to like throw Tibbs under the bus? He's not going to throw him under the bus publicly because he would never do that. But for all we know, I mean, he talks to his teammates. He's close to his teammates. I guarantee you he's had conversations with Mikal Bridges and Karl-Anthony Towns, and guys have expressed frustration with Tom Thibodeau at various points. There's no question that that's happened. But he's not going to bring that up in public. But you know where he might do it? In an exit meeting behind closed doors after the season.
With his godfather.
Right. Right. And so, yeah, like I can't say I'm surprised by it. And I do think that if they felt like this core group was being underutilized and that the frustrations of those players, like, you know, Mikal Bridges clearly expressed frustration with Tom Thibodeau this year. I don't know how that went over internally because he's kind of the first guy to say something like that publicly about Tibbs and the minutes and all that stuff. Maybe it didn't go over well. But if you do a bunch of exit meetings and you're getting gripes from a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns, who Leon Rose and World Wide West know really well for years, right? They've known him for years, going back to Kentucky, going back to his first years in the NBA. They've known him for years. If you hear that stuff from a guy like Josh Hart, who Leon Rose very specifically has known for years because he's a CIA client. If you hear that stuff from, you know, whoever, like Mitchell Robinson, I doubt he'd said anything. Just mostly because I can't imagine Mitchell Robinson like taking an exit meeting seriously. But even if like a guy like Deuce McBride, if you hear that frustration being expressed across from players, and then you hear the stuff like we were talking about this on the pod that I don't know will probably never be released now, but like when you read that stuff about how they had in that Fred Katz, James Edward piece in the Athletic that came out the night the Knicks lost in the conference finals, where it's, you know, you read about how it's like they felt like they needed a voice in the locker room. So when they made the decision to sign a 15th man, did they want somebody who could play, or do they want somebody who could just kind of like, you know, be a good voice in the locker room? They went after a guy who'd be a good voice in the locker room. And PJ Tucker is talking about how like these guys aren't holding each other accountable. There's lack of communication, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff to me just sounds like the coaching staff was not, either they weren't getting across their message very well, or they were not doing that part of the job. They were not doing the human element of the job, which is massaging egos, which is getting guys to buy in and be on the same page and not just expect them to do it. Because I think past rosters that we've had, it's a lot easier to get Quentin Grimes in his second year, Emmanuel Quickley in his third year, Deuce McBride in his second year. Like, it's a lot easier to get those guys and Josh Hart, a midseason acquisition, to come in and buy into a role on it, because, you know, because it's like, hey, those guys, especially those younger guys, they're just like, man, this is awesome. I know exactly what my role is every night, and I get to play every night, and we're winning basketball games. This is great. How wonderful. But that's just not every roster is going to be like that. And it's not realistic for every roster to be like that, especially when you have a coach who kind of like when you're out of the rotation, you're just out of the rotation. Like, this is not like, oh, yeah, don't worry. Like, I didn't play you tonight, but tomorrow it could be your night. No, it's like, if you're out of the rotation, you're out of the rotation. You know, like, that's just how it is. And it takes a lot to get back in, right? Like, it takes emergency. Like, you know, again, this year, right? We saw Delon Wright and Landry Shamet where they just didn't play, or not playing in the playoffs. Landry Shamet got like 2 opportunities in the first 2 games against Detroit. Wasn't very good. He just disappeared. He was gone. And then you go behind 2-0 to Indiana. And now, not only do you change your starting lineup, but you're adding players into the rotation. And you have to figure all this stuff out. And it's just, I just don't know how feasible that is. And I just think it got to a point with this roster, with this group of players, with guys that aren't like, yeah, maybe like I think I'm not going to say that guys like Karl Anthony Towns or Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby that they're not hungry. I think they're hungry. They want to win. But I also think they're not going to just like if they think something is stupid, I don't think they're just going to be the good soldier. Like I think that they're going to express that frustration in various ways. For OG Anunoby, that might be just doing stupid shit on offense and not trying on defense for a month or something. Or in Mikal Bridges' case, it might be saying something publicly that could be taken a certain way. I can't get into this.
These guys are fucking grown ass men who are closer to retirement than they are to their first year of college, and they make tens of millions of dollars. Like they're not here to fucking, they're not on their rookie deal like Obi and IQ having to prove that they're the good soldier and coachable and all that. Like these guys have brands in the NBA for better and for worse. They weren't fucking recruited to the Knicks because of Tibbs. They were recruited to the Knicks because of the stars on the Knicks and because of the front office traded for them, right? Like Tibbs did not trade for them. The front office traded for them. So they have reason to believe they're wanted. And that reason is that this team went out and got them, right? Like they hired these players basically, right? This isn't a draft pick where it's like a team picked you, but yeah, like, you know, it's inherently a gamble and it depends on how you develop. It's like these guys are fully formed NBA players for the most part. So, you know, it goes hand in hand with what folks have always said, right? Which is like, as far as getting buy-in, Tibbs is really good, especially with younger guys and developing guys, right? Swin has constantly had to correct people, I feel like, when talking about like, oh, like, does Tibbs develop kids? And it's like, well, actually, yes, it's tough for young players to get in his favor, but when they do, things go well for them almost always.
And also development isn't just like getting minutes. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
He might not be the best at handing guys a role right off the bat, but the amount of players who have developed while he's been their head coach, whether they're in the rotation or not, is indisputable. Now, always you give the credit to the player, but you don't develop that many quality NBA.
Yeah, by coincidence, I think is what Schwinn was gonna say. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, and then the other piece of it is like the I'm hearing an echo on somebody's line. I don't know.
Oh, let me.
The one thing that I'll also say is, you know, in general, I actually thought Tibbs this postseason, it was the weirdest postseason I've ever had to like evaluate him, because tactically I think he was good. Like I flat out thought he did a good job tactically in these playoffs against Detroit, against Boston, against Indiana. Now, obviously, players have to execute all that stuff, and offensively, there's always going to be stuff that he leaves on the table. I'll always like it's just what it is. But like, yeah, I thought defensively how he approached all of these opponents was actually very good and better than he has in the past. But then amidst that, you're also left with this like, what the fuck are these lineups piece of it? And you're like, if those things can never be together, right? Where your tactical approach meets the best utilization of the talent at your disposal, that's just a fundamental problem that is always going to be an obstacle at a certain point. And, you know, people might call him a scapegoat. I don't really know how you could call him a scapegoat when they have given him, I think plenty of coaches would have been fired after that 2021-22 season. Flat out. Would have been fired. I think plenty of coaches would have been fired after that start to that 2022-23 season. I think a lot of coaches might have been fired after that Miami series in the 2022-23 season. They have stuck with him. They gave him an extension. They gave him this year with this group of players who they clearly thought had the potential to challenge for a title. And they if you look at everything in totality, a team, you get to the Eastern Conference Finals, but a team that gets to Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals and ends up with literally a 0.0 net rating in the playoffs has scored the same amount of points as they've allowed is an anomaly and not indicative of a team that's firing on all cylinders. That's a team that is sputtering from high to low constantly.
Getting saved often by the clutch player of the year too, right? That a lot of it, right? You say they're good at winning at close games, but a lot of that is because this guy just makes it happen, right? That's not the coach.
Yeah, and there was just never like a consistency or an equilibrium to their play this year. Like last year, despite when they were shorthanded, you always felt like you knew what to expect game to game. Players could change, rotations could change, lineups could change, but you had an idea, an expectation of how they were going to approach the game, what they were going to bring to the table, and all of that. And I just thought this year, like, it wasn't there. Like, it just felt like their losses were so ugly and weird at times. You had these bizarre stretches of the season where it's like you go, like, remember that stretch they go to San Antonio and Charlotte.
They won in spite of a bunch of fucking weirdness, right? Like whether it was like sometimes they won in spite of their offense, sometimes in spite of their defense, sometimes it was just Brunson saving them, like Stacey was saying. I was writing a whole piece, and thankfully I didn't get that fucking far into it because I guess I won't really need to write it now. But like the whole idea was basically about the weirdness of this postseason and the idea that Tibbs squandered a minor miracle given to him by his players in the Boston series. And the miracle was that he asked them to do something, to play a defensive scheme they had no experience doing, except for very rare instances in the regular season. And they not only did it, but they did it well versus the defending fucking champions. Like, that is unheard of. That is, like, once a coach has to ask his team to do something completely different schematically like that, like, it was the right call, right? Like, from just a basketball philosophy framework, that is how you defend the Celtics. It was the right schematic decision by the coach, and he deserves a lot of credit for pulling that trigger. But usually that is actually not enough unless your team can actually do it. And this team, nobody had any reason to believe they could do it because he never asked them to do that shit. And they did it, which is crazy. And then we get the Pacers series where you see what happens if you're overmatched and you don't have a miracle at your back. And in fact, the other team has miracles at their back, right? So I think a lot of us were worried that the front office would, to some extent, favor the results on paper and hand wave away a lot of the process issues, right? Because, like, even if Tibbs did the right adjustment, like, the right adjustment matters for fuck all if you don't have the tools to execute it. And there were good reasons to think we didn't, for both practice and personnel reasons. So I think the front office really took notice of a lot of that. And I know Stacey and Schwinn and some others were wondering, like, as the playoffs went on, like, this maybe is not as simple as, oh, the Knicks defeated Boston and now they're safe. Expectations were changing because this was just an overall really weird playoff sequence, I guess, or series, as sequence of series.
Yeah, and I think they watched the games, right? So on the surface, if before the series, and I know Prez, I know you were very skeptical about the Detroit series because I think you gave them more credit than I did, and it definitely looks like you were correct in that assessment. But if you look on the surface before the playoffs, you say, yeah, they had a tough series against Detroit, but they pulled it out. 4-2 would look from the macro looks fine, but they're watching the games and they're seeing that they're really struggling. And it'd be one thing if Detroit was just shooting the lights out and throwing stuff at them that you hadn't seen, and or Cade gets to just a superstar level. But you watch these games, and I this could be a bias or whatever. For all three series, at least so maybe in Boston, but when they were flowing, it definitely looked different. Everything looks a lot harder for the Knicks, right? Even Detroit is a much more limited offensive team, but they were getting into sets, they were flowing, guys were making reads. Against the Knicks, it looked either disjointed and stagnant, or they're rushed. And even when they're flowing well, it's usually just Brunson's on a heater. And again, maybe this is an oversimplification. It just looked very difficult. And there were. I mean, he didn't. You don't want to make this about Deuce McBride. Like, we noticed it. Everyone in Knicks Twitter noticed it. The ESPN was constantly talking about that starting lineup. He didn't play it at all, and there was reason to play it in that Boston series. I think playing Mitch was the right adjustment, because Deuce is probably going to have more of a limited impact when everyone is pretty big on that and physical, right? So there isn't a super great matchup. I think he did well on Drew when he was defending him, but he did a decent job on Peyton Pritchard for the most part. Against that series, it makes sense. Boston's also a very good offensive rebounding team. That size, that rim protection, the fact that he can switch now, which is very interesting and a nice add if Mitch can stay healthy. That made sense. Against Indiana, he was a little bit more limited because they were truly going 5 out. They were taking him completely out of the action. And their bigs are not, even Siakam now is not a guy you can just leave open. And so, like, it's not that he can't guard on the perimeter, but now it's the same thing. You don't have that rim protection. They still, because he's an insane offensive rebounder, were like more neutral with that lineup. But that was a series where, like, they're throwing out all these guards and you're struggling at the point of attack. This is where Deuce makes sense. And, it's forget about whether he's starting or not. He just didn't play him with that lineup. And it tells me that they're watching those things. It tells me that this is probably a front office that originally, when Tibbs was stubborn, was thinking, that's fine, we're developing an identity. This is a team of veterans, right? It's about giving yourselves that versatility. And it's tough not to look around the league. I keep on bringing up Oklahoma City up. They experiment with a ton of different lineups. They won 68 games. It's not like it came at the expense of winning every game. So it's tough to make those calls. And ultimately, the front office had to decide. I want to revisit this now, because you said, I think it was a few weeks ago, it might even be before this playoff started, but you said it would actually be very bold of the front office to fire Tibbs, because at that point, it is all on them. That is, now you're saying that this is, you are being held to account on your roster, and you get to pick your coach again now. And, this is this season, 25-26, I don't think Rose is on the hot seat, but this is probably the most scrutiny he's going to have been in, at least since his first season. I think that during the whole time. And this kind of accelerates it. I think he knows that this is it. Like, this is our chance, and we need everything to be optimized. But I'd love to revisit that, your statement there and how you're thinking about that now as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've always thought that, like, even if you go back to, like, discussing firing Fizdale, he was fired, there were all these people that at that time, when the Knicks were, what were they, 4-19 or something when they fired him, like, people even then were defending this coach, and they were like, well, the roster this and that thing that, and then you get the gutted and
rudderless.
Right. So you get all that, and I was just like, I don't see how this is. I don't know how a front office ever firing a coach. I mean, there are some moments where it's like, okay, now you're just scapegoating the coach, like the Suns situation, right? Where it's like every year they're firing a coach. It's like, your roster sucks. Like, this has, like, your coach is not the problem. If every coach you have is the problem, then it's not just the coach, right? The Knicks haven't fired a bunch of coaches. They have had Tom Thibodeau for 5 years. 5 years they kept him. Check how many coaches in the NBA right now have been coaching their team for 5 years. Go check out that list. It's not many. It's not. Mike Malone just got fired this year. The guy won a fucking championship 2 years ago. Taylor Jenkins just got fired this year. He won Coach of the Year 3 years ago. He was considered an up and coming the next great coach of the Popovich tree. This is a competitive league. The margins are fine. How many teams are even trying to tank anymore? Like the Western Conference next year, there might be one team in the West that wants to suck, even though Danny Ainge's fucking hellspawn said yesterday that they're not going to try to tank next year. The Utah Jazz will be tanking. But like even in the East, how many teams are actively trying to be bad? Not many. So in a league where every team is trying to win basketball games, the majority of teams are trying to win basketball games, and that increases your competition for talent, and it puts a heightened importance on things like player development and coaching, because coaching is all about margins. Coaches do not solely win you championships. They are like a great coach doesn't take the worst roster in the NBA and turn it into a playoff team. It's not how it works. But a great coach has to win margins consistently. And to me, the difference between Tom Thibodeau and one of the true elite at higher echelon coaches, a guy like Rick Carlisle, in my opinion, is Carlisle, and you saw it in this series, Carlisle's ability to be versatile, his knowledge of his roster, because he tried so many things during the regular season, he could pull on different levers that the Knicks didn't have knowledge of on their roster. And then situationally understanding what's needed and therefore being able to press the right buttons, understanding those things, that is where the difference was. Tom Thibodeau is great at establishing a culture. Tom Thibodeau is great at giving your organization a consistent baseline of competency, of consistency, of performance. You're never going to be the worst team in the NBA or some fucking laughing stock with Tom Thibodeau. It's never going to happen because he will not coach that way. He's too good of a coach for that to happen. But the same things that make him a great coach or a very good coach are the same things that I think prevent him at times from getting your team to the level it needs to go to. I would have been fine. I tweeted this yesterday. If they kept him, but hired added real assistance to his coaching staff and truly put somebody in charge of the offense that Tibbs gave them the reins to be like, hey, the offense is yours. And letting them kind of install different things. I would have been fine with that because I do think like to be clear, this is not like some slam dunk moment. Like it's not like you fired the worst coach in the NBA and anybody that comes in is going to be way better. I don't think that. I think it is a risk. It is a risk to fire Tom Thibodeau, but I think it's a risk you have to take at a certain point. If your evaluation is, we feel he's not getting the most out of this roster, and probably you might even feel it even more if your evaluation is, even if we make changes to the roster, we don't trust him to then make the best of that opportunity. At a certain point, you have to cut bait. You have to roll the dice. And nobody can make an argument that they have not given him a chance. No organization, Tom Thibodeau would not have been hired by any other team when he was hired by the Knicks. Never would have happened. After hit Minnesota, his fucking stock was in the tank. It would not have happened. He would not have been hired. So they gave him plenty of opportunities and they gave him a bunch of time and they put in a lot of resources into this team over the years to build it. Anybody that's saying he's getting a raw deal or he's being scapegoated is full of shit. They're wrong. And that's all there is to say to it. Like, they gave him more than enough chance. It's a risk to fire him, but I think it's a reasonable risk that they have to take at a certain point in time.
I do want to just, Khan, welcome, by the way. Sorry, shout out Khan. Sorry. I do want to read this because I burst out laughing. Someone posted some takes from Obvious Bozos, so maybe we need to leave it for that show. But Sam Quinn tweeted out, I'm going to throw out a wild card name for the Knicks job, Chris Paul. I doubt he'd take it. It seems like he wants to keep playing, but if he wants to coach, he's a clear candidate to make the next Kid Redick jump straight to a top job. Obviously, Leon Rose knows him quite well. That is hilarious to me. I don't think they're going to go that route at all. This doesn't seem to call for that situation. Those were like Redick especially had a great relationship with the players, meddling. The kid was experienced when he went to Dallas. And in other situations, it's been, and the Nash thing was, again, high maintenance stars. This is ridiculous, right? Chris Paul.
Yeah, I don't want Chris Paul coaching this team. I think there's like the speculation that I directly went to when I got this notification was, did they feel like they were on a timeline because Johnny Bryant might take the Suns job, and they've worked with Johnny Bryant. He has a little bit of that Tibbs in him, where he worked with Tibbs. They know that he'll value the day in, day out, and the intensity, and all 82 games of the regular season the same way Tibbs did, but with those little modern touches of willing to go 5 out, willing to, go on those lineups where there's 2 starters or 3 bench players, and it's not always hockey subs, at the 6-minute mark of every quarter or whatever the case may be. So I think this is kind of a perfect storm for them, really. And I think they got a little bit lucky with the way the Indiana series played out. You saw that there was very reasonable cause for firing Tibbs. There's a candidate that they like, who they had in-house for whatever it was, 4 seasons, where there was real development from a bunch of players who gave Johnny a bunch of credit for that development. There was a track record for him before he even came over here in Utah, where he worked with Donovan Mitchell, and Mitchell credited him for a lot of the growth over there. So I really feel like there's a little bit of a trail to follow here. Who knows? Maybe it doesn't end up being Johnny Bryant, but I think there's some puzzle pieces you could put together and probably reasonably say he might be the guy that they want to bring in. Again, and there's nothing here that is like anything more than a guess. So,
is it fair to rule out Jay Wright? I think Schwinn, you've talked about how it seems like the Nova thing, like Brunson hasn't been maybe enough of a vocal leader. Like, we talked about the tension in the locker room. Is that too close for comfort, maybe, Jay Wright, or is he just not interested? I don't know. But
I mean, I'll be honest with you, I have never watched college basketball close enough to feel like I know enough about Jay Wright to say yes or no one way or the other in terms of his credentials. Obviously, I know he's a great college coach. He won multiple championships, so he has that going for him. I know his
3 guys in the roster, right?
Yeah, so. And I know his offenses were considered very modern for their time. There was a lot of like well-developed kind of the stuff we've talked about all year, where it's like you want to see more layers to the offense, you want to see more ball movement, you want to see more player movement. I know those are hallmarks of his Villanova team. But I can't. So sure, if you want to interview him, that's fine. I don't know that he should be some like, we have to hire this guy because we have 3 Villanova guys. That doesn't really make sense to me. I think maybe we'll find out. Maybe we'll get leaks to this stuff about why did they fire Tom Thibodeau, right? What was the reason to move on from Tom Thibodeau? If you
You're definitely gonna get leaks from fucking Tom's camp. I'll tell you that. It's about to get pettier.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Frank Isola and Stefan Bondi will be inundating us with many things. By the way, the fact that both of them were crying yesterday about Leon Rose not doing a press conference and how he owes it to Tibbs to do one, I wonder if they knew something from maybe Tibbs' side that job was a little bit more on the hot seat than a lot of people expected.
Speaking of petty, Kendra Randall just posted a video of herself and Julius Randle toasting their wine glasses in Italy.
That's good for them.
10 minutes after Randall. Sorry.
You don't think that's a bit of a reach, though? People do that when they're on vacation.
You don't think that's...
I don't think we need to talk about Kendra Randall and Julius Randle on this pod. But I think that so that's it. Why did you fire Tom Thibodeau? If you know, if they know, they obviously know why they fired him. The reasons you fire him should inform what you're looking for in your next coach. So I can't tell you what those reasons are. I don't know. I'm not in the fucking room. I'm not Leon Rose, contrary. I know my face can fool you, but no, I'm not Leon Rose. But whatever those reasons are, that will inform you of who your next head coach will be. And I will say, for all the stuff about lineups and rotations, and those things are real. The thing that really stood out to me this year was just, I thought the team so often offensively, and some of this is about the lineups that you field, but even within that, so often you're looking at, there's this lack of floor balance. There's multiple guys cutting to the same spot. There's players standing on top of each other in the corner, not spaced out appropriately. And all of those things, like you can watch the Indiana series, and we all did, and it's like, I don't remember what the final stat was in terms of transition points for and against, but I think at one point in the middle of the game they put up the number and it was like 122 transition points for Indiana in Game 6, through those 6 games, and 48 for the Knicks. And so much of that is like, there is some of like guys need to get back on defense and hustle and stuff, but a lot of it would just be like plays where you're watching it and it's like, okay, Cat's driving to the lane, Mitchell Robinson is already under the rim, Josh Hart is now crashing as well. So now you've got 3 guys under the rim, and if they don't get the offensive rebound, the Pacers are out and they got numbers. And you could see, the Pacers were the opponent to really like punish them for it, but you could see that throughout the regular season as well, where that lack of floor balance was so, I thought it stood out all season to me. It stood out all season to me. And that to me is a departure from the teams that we saw under Tibbs in the previous 4 seasons, which is why I do wonder if there's something to the idea of like, hey, Johnny Bryant left, he's up for this Phoenix job. If we're having doubts about Tom Thibodeau, and we know Johnny Bryant, we don't need to interview him. We know him. Like, we literally know him. We have a pretty good fucking idea of how he fits with this roster.
We can hand him the job if we want to.
Yeah, like if and you can have that conversation with him privately after whatever. Like that might be part of the consideration here. I wouldn't write that off.
The broader kind of like less specific version of that is team seasons are done. Teams are starting hiring interviews. Teams are starting outreach to see what's up, right? Like, you can wait for the finals. You can wait for the exit interviews. You can wait to fucking read tea leaves or whatever. But like, even if it's not Johnny, say it's 10 candidates, all these fucking teams are going to be looking at them. Any team that either has an interim right now or hasn't fired a coach yet but will are hiring from the same pool of candidates right now, unless you're the Thunder or the Pacers for the most part. So, and that's, remember, it's not just looking for head coaches, but assistants move, right? We saw Johnny move, right? So like, these guys are all considering like, where can I interview for a head coach position? Where can I interview for an assistant coach, associate coach, right? This is popping out there right now in the off season. It doesn't feel like it because we still have basketball, but like, this shit is already underway, and we know the way this front office operates is to begin thinking about and acting on any of these possibilities sooner rather than later, right? Like, every time some shit goes down, McCall trade, Cat trade, we know they were running the permutations and stuff well in advance, and the whole point of that was to be ready to go at a moment's notice, because this is just how they operate.
And you know what else? I looked this up this morning and I was shocked. If they waited any longer, the draft is 3 weeks away. And yeah, they only have the 50th pick, so whatever. They don't have a first and all that stuff. But you need to get your guy in the building and talk draft strategies with him. Is there a guy in the late first that you want to trade up for? Walt Perrin, all these guys. They got to have conversations with the staff. Do you want to make adjustments to the staff? You need time for that. So I didn't know it would come today. I didn't expect that it would come today. But I guess in a way, if they waited any longer, it wasn't possible. So like all the timeline stuff, I kind of feel like we, maybe not as fans, should have been more proactive, but this always was how it had to be if it was going to happen.
Well, to your point about the draft, like, less about the 50th pick, but like other trades happen, right? Like, say the Knicks do want to, they might fucking trade Mikal Bridges still, or Josh Hart, or Deuce, or any of these guys, right?
Yeah.
Who are not Brunson. And generally, like, you want to have as much stuff settled early on as you can before you do that kind of shit. So like, it could still, even if it's not a draft pick, other shit could happen.
Yeah.
Do you think it portends a trade if they pick Budenholzer?
They're not gonna, I will be fucking shocked if they pick Mike Budenholzer. Like,
and given that, it would indicate that there's
a
certain guy needs to get used to pizza instead of just cheese.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Like, look, we can speculate, right? The reasons why you'd fire Tom Thibodeau are this: one, you want somebody who's going to use the regular season as a fact-finding opportunity and not just like treat it like, hey, I need to play the exact rotation I think is the best for the entire 82 games and try to win as many basketball games doing that as much as I can. Two, you want your offense to be more layered. You want it to have more diversity. You want more off-ball movement, player movement, motion, things that put defenses in conflict. Three, you want a coach who is going to have more personable communication with players. That's not to say that Tibbs was some mutant who didn't talk to his guys. Obviously, we know he was close with Brunson and Hart. But do I think that he was the most, like, I think his relationship with those two guys is probably more of an outlier than it is for how he communicates with most players on most of his teams. I mean, Jeff Teague, who is not necessarily the greatest basketball mind ever, but is somebody who I think is fairly transparent about things and very honest, has talked about this many times, and it's not unique. You see issues with Tom Thibodeau's teams in terms of their chemistry, team chemistry, towards the end of his time in his previous stops. In Chicago, Jimmy Butler becoming a star actually created some chaos in the locker room that Tibbs was not able to manage between Derrick Rose and Pau Gasol and Jimmy Butler and Joakim Noah at that time too. And then you saw that in Minnesota again, where he trades for Butler and Butler starts just being an asshole to guys in the locker room, and Tibbs doesn't address it or handle it in any which way. And I don't think that we had any of that type of shit going on here. Like, I don't think Kat and Mikal or Jalen Brunson or Josh Hart was running around the locker room talking mad shit to people. But I think there comes a point where you're watching this team and you can tell that they're not gelling and they're not totally on the same page. And maybe you need to have some hard conversations with guys. And it didn't seem like that ever happened. So I think they probably want somebody who's a more personable coach in some ways as well. And, that's what I would look at. So to the point about Mike Budenholzer, probably not the guy you want if you want a personable coach.
What if Giannis says he'll come here?
I was about to say that.
That's what I was getting at. If they did hire I would agree with everything you said, but if they hired Budenholzer, despite that, it would indicate
he didn't care that Budenholzer got fired in Milwaukee. He's not going to be like, I'm only coming to New York if you hire Mike Budenholzer. 100% not happening. We have a super chat. We should probably get to these. Sorry. John Leary says, my phone is blowing up right now with executives everywhere around the league just stunned. This was for Shams Charania from, what is he? He's on ESPN now.
That's why he's ignoring K's text. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, if you're stunned by this, I don't know what to tell you, because it's not that stunning to me. I mean, I guess it's stunning if you just thought he was safe, but not really that stunning. And
I think it's stunning if you look at how this front office has operated until last year, and really until that OG trade, very methodical. And they just signed Tibbs to an extension. And this isn't a reactionary front office, but they have not been risk averse, right? So I think it's stunning in that sense that they have continuously improved. Stay the course has been the MO for much of it, but I think it misses some of the things that they have done and been willing to do. I think Randall getting traded was probably shocking in the same way, but not if you followed the team. Sorry to interrupt. Though. Go ahead.
No, it's
real quick. I'll tell you why all these fucking GMs are stunned, because just like coaches always put their feet in the shoes of other coaches and then rush to defend other coaches, other GMs are like, wow, if I beat the Boston Celtics and I got fired, I'd be fucking shocked. And guess what? This was a weird playoff series. And again, watch the actual team, watch the actual games, watch the actual expectations, right? Instead of just putting on your surface level empathy, think about if you traded for Kat, Mikal, all these guys, and they underperformed, how safe would your job be, right? That's where these other executives are coming from. It's purely a perspective of I would hate to achieve something that I viewed as successful and it was not enough. That's exactly where all these fucking people are coming from. But it's not. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who actually like takes more than 5 seconds to think about it.
Yeah, I agree.
Also,
This is
anybody who the Knicks want, anybody who the Knicks want is going to come here. This is the best job in not just basketball, but
it's a really good point.
Professional sports. Like right now, not just because we are the Knicks, but because we are the Knicks with Jalen Brunson and Cat coming off of an Eastern Conference Finals appearance. Like this might be one of the best coaching jobs in how long? Honestly. Like you take out the in-season stuff with Denver and whatever. Who is a better coaching job than this? Like the Heatles never got a job, the opportunity to hire a new coach. It was always Spo.
Golden State, you can say, right?
Golden State was, but
I don't even think people realized Steph was Steph at that point.
Exactly. And Golden State, when they hired Steve Kerr, was not what we are right now. So I think Johnny Bryant could be writing that first bit of ink on the contract, and he would tear it up in front of Phoenix and hop on a plane right back here. Like this job has more gravitational pull than the fucking sun.
And I think part of the reason why the Knicks were probably not looked at, why a guy like Steve Kerr would have passed on it, is because even if he trusted Phil Jackson, right, the front office had been a shit show, right? So you had all the pressure. I do think that speaks, you had all the pressure of New York and all of that, but you don't have a competent front office. They're short-sighted, whatever. I think that people will want to work for Leon Rose. They've seen what he's done from really a hopeless situation. While they probably, feel like Tibbs maybe, and the coaching fraternity is tight, so they probably did feel like he didn't get a fair stick. I think that'll make it attractive. On the other hand, I'll push back on UConn a little bit and say this. They just fired Tibbs. That screams to me that the Eastern Conference Finals was not good enough, right? Maybe you say that, well, they'll judge the process. So if next year you get to the second round, but you lose a hard-fought series with better process, whatever. The goal is very clearly championship or bust. Do you think that would scare off anyone, who's worried about job security or that kind of thing?
No, because you're like, that's what you want as a coach. You want to coach a team that you think has championship ability. And I promise you, there are plenty of coaches in this league that would look at that roster and be like, no disrespect to Tibbs, I think I can get more into that group. I guarantee you there are plenty of coaches that look at this roster and say, I could do that. I would do this thing. I would do that thing. That doesn't mean
it would make the best shooting big in the NBA fucking take more than 5 threes a game. All the other coaches would do that.
And they could be wrong, by the way. Like, that's my point. Is like, there is a risk. Like, there is risk that a new coach comes in, has all these great ideas on paper, but they just don't take, like, the roster doesn't take to it, and things don't work out that way. So the pressure is on the front office here for sure, to hire the right coach and then for that coach to deliver. But I think plenty of coaches want that opportunity. They want that pressure. They want the chance to do it. And what I will also say is, if you're a coach looking at this front office, you'll look at it and be like, they gave Tom Thibodeau 5 years. This is not a team. This is not the Phoenix Suns. Okay. This is not a team that has had a new fucking coach every year for the last 3 years. It's a very different team. It's a very different organization. They have shown that they will be patient with coaches, with players. Like, they haven't generally been in the business of acquire a player, immediately flip player. Like, the one time they did that was basically with Dante, right? And that's, I think, a pretty reasonable decision they made that was forced on them for a lot of reasons. Not forced on them, but one that they felt that they needed to make for a lot of different reasons out of their control. And I think if you look at their operation and their process in totality as a coach, you would look at it and be like, okay, this doesn't seem like an organization that just wildly takes big swings for no reason and then is like immediately trying to pivot off them. That's not what I would think looking at this team from the outside in. So I would say that. This is from Adabombo Adejobi. Thank you for the super chat. You think Rick Brunson is fired too or stays with the new coach? Leon doing this means we're building with Cat. Wanted him gone, but appreciate everything Tom Thibodeau did. I actually am kind of curious about the Rick Brunson situation. honestly, if a new coach comes in, I could see Brunson going. I don't know that Jalen Brunson needs Rick Brunson on the staff. I also don't know that it like matters that much as long as there's an understanding that, like, hey, Rick, you're going to be on the staff, but you're here to just like work Jalen Brunson out pregame and give guys like chest bumps when they come back to the bench and stuff. Like, you're not actually the lead assistant, so chill out. I do think Cat is much more likely to stay. I'll also say I think Mikal Bridges is much more likely to stay now. And yeah, look, I've been really, really critical of Tom Thibodeau, and I'm sure people will not believe me when I say this, but I do appreciate everything he's done with the Knicks. I think he's done a hell of a job. I just think that he had ran his course here, and that's okay. That happens. That's not knock on Tom Thibodeau. He's a hell of a coach, but I just did not think that he was ever going to be the guy to get you to the top. And even despite them making the Eastern Conference Finals, I felt that way. But because he made the Eastern Conference Finals, I would have kept him. I would have kept him under certain conditions and specific parameters. And I don't know, maybe they had this conversation with him. But if it were me, if I were Leon, and I was talking to Tom Thibodeau for the season, I would have been like, more or less, I would have said, hey, I'm going to need you to hire an assistant. We can work with you on who that is. An offensive assistant that's in charge of the offense. That is their baby. They're going to install principles, and these are the principles that we want to see, right? We want to see more, whatever it is, more ball movement, more player movement. We want to take more threes, whatever the hell it is. You can lay that stuff out with him. But that would have been my first condition. Second condition would have been stuff about certain players. Like, I need a guarantee that Josh Hart's not starting, that he's not going to play 35 minutes a night. I need that. I'm sorry. I need Josh Hart to be treated like the great role player that he is. That would have been my second condition. My third condition would have been, I need you to promise me that we're going to use lineups and rotations and change things up and try different things in the regular season, because we need to use that opportunity to give us an idea of understanding our roster and our optionality within the roster to the fullest. So when we're in the playoffs and maybe we need to call on stuff situationally, or maybe we need to make a big lineup adjustment, we're more well prepared for that. If these things are not, if you cannot sign off on these things, then thank you for your services, Tom. We're going to let you go. You got $33 million still guaranteed coming your way. Okay? So, yeah, raw deal, fucking scapegoat, spare me all that shit. That's not what happened here. Again, I would have kept him under those conditions. Maybe they tried to make that happen. I don't know. If they did and he just wasn't willing to, then I think you have to move on, because at that point, if you keep him, you're keeping him under conditions that you, as the steward of the organization in many ways, right? Leon Rose is the steward of the organization. You have to do what's best for the organization. If Tibbs is not aligned with what you think needs to be done to get the most out of the roster, then you have to move on. It's that simple.
Look, man,
sorry, go ahead. Do you think Tibbs pushed back on the idea of an offensive coordinator? Because I think earlier this week there was a rumor that they were talking about to Jones Borrego, but Tibbs, I think Tibbs. Sorry, Press. I think you're familiar both with that, and yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, there's no way really knowing without leaks, like how he would react to something like that, right? Because the inherent issue is how much control does an OC have relative to Tibbs, right? Like, does an offensive coordinator come up with play calls during the game? Do they design the framework, right? There's different. I don't know how it works in football because I don't know shit about football, but in basketball, at least to my knowledge, the actual authorities and roles of an offensive coordinator type coach can vary quite a lot from team to team. So there's a lot of permutations where Tibbs is probably like, no, I just want somebody to focus on giving me suggestions and that's it, right? Or like there are versions of that role that Tibbs could easily view as an infringement of sorts on his own ability to do his job as the coach, right? Like, which I would totally get. Like, there's different coaches have different styles as far as how they utilize their assistants. So, maybe they had that conversation. It'll be really hard to know unless we get some reporting on that. It's a good question, but I just think to like take that topic and go out to the macro level, like we've talked about it all the time. Like the front office is full of fucking nerds. They're not stupid. They know what Cat does well and what he doesn't do well. They know what Mikal Bridges, they know all of it, all this stuff that we talk about on every podcast, like the fact that Cat is one of the better shooting bigs and is shooting a career low in terms of threes per game. Like they know that. They know that Mikal Bridges had a 95th percentile pick and roll ball handler efficiency on the Brooklyn Nets. And then that play type dropped precipitously as far as his usage goes in New York. They know all this stuff, right? And it's not to say Tibbs did not find things for these players that do work well in different ways, right? Like OG took a step forward. Cat's drives were really good this season in space. Like that was a good use of his skills as a stretch five. But there's just a lot of things that are easy to identify as having gone as having not aligned with the vision of the players that they acquired, right? Like, and the biggest one of all is the Josh Hart stuff. Like, they traded for Josh Hart. They know he's really good. I'm sure they also know that he shouldn't when we know the Knicks were mulling in some capacity, maybe imploring. I don't know what adjective specifically you want to choose is up to you, but they were pushing Tibbs to consider changing the lineups in the playoffs. And literally, he changed the lineups and then played Josh Hart more. Like, that's crazy. And like, a lot of people in the media and shit like that give Tibbs the benefit of the doubt. And like Srin said, he's done a lot to earn the benefit of the doubt. But that's a little bit of a middle finger, right? If it's like, first of all the data says one thing, I'm going to ignore it. And then when I'm finally down enough that you give me an ultimatum as a front office of some sort, and then I do it, I'm going to give you a big fuck you and basically just like do it in name only. Even though even the name only change only helped, right? Because then now you were not down 10 instantly to start every fucking first and third quarter. But like, if I'm the front office, like this has long moved past differences of philosophy that reasonable people can differ on, right? Like at some point he's using the tools that you've provided him in ways very counter to what you envisioned. And like, what did we say when Tibbs first started? Anytime a coaching hunt starts, it's that the front office and the coach need to be aligned regarding the vision for personnel, for scheme, right? Like the front office is not going to tell the coach how to coach on a minute-to-minute basis. They're not going to pick the lineups, but they have to have a vision. And that vision, I think, has slowly diverged, right? Like basketball with Julius and offensive rebounds and Brunson just being a heat-seeking missile, they were really aligned on all that. And then that version of the team had to die for Cat purposes, really. And just because you were coming up on a cliff in terms of the Julius Randle contract situation and his performances, both good and bad. And this year, more than any other, you saw a divergence of philosophy between the front office and Tibbs. And it's not just the nerds versus the not nerds, right? Like, you look at someone like Worldwide West. I promise you, Worldwide West is wondering why the fuck Karl Anthony Towns ain't shooting more threes. I promise you. Miles Turner has got all this creative shit being run for him. Evan Mobley is bringing up the ball, running pick and rolls inverted. Jared Allen is getting like playing high-low games with fucking Evan Mobley and switching onto the perimeter regularly throughout the whole season. Worldwide West is not stupid. Like, he sees all this shit. Like, all the Knicks front office, they see all of this stuff. They don't just have blinders on. So it's like Schwinn said, it's not without any risk. Like, it's very possible that the front office's vision is not one that leads to a championship, because it's really hard to win a championship, right? Like, plenty of teams have a good idea and it works out poorly, right? Look at Memphis. So it's not uncommon at all. But when you do have that divergence, it's kind of hard to fix that, right? Like, this is for better or worse, Tibbs has his basketball beliefs. It just is what it is.
And like, there's only so many times. I'll just say this because I know it's a fact. Like the lineup stuff, he was told like multiple, or not told is probably strong. He was recommended multiple times to change the starting lineup. He didn't do it until Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals. He was highly recommended to do it during the Boston series. Didn't do it. Stuck with that lineup. They win Game 6. Okay. Comes out starting lineup, first 2 games. You lose those 2 games. Like, and we know in the past, right? There have been things that, you know, I don't care. Again, people can just pretend it didn't happen. You're fucking joking if you think that at 10-13 in 2022-23, when all of a sudden he benches Evan Fournier, benches Derrick Rose, starts Quentin Grimes, makes Emmanuel quickly the 6th man, puts Deuce McBride in the rotation, and also takes out Cam Reddish. You're kidding yourself if you think he came to that exact set of decisions at the same time if he just came to that by himself. You're kidding yourself. There's only so many times that you have to be cajoled and convinced and have your ego massaged to make the decision that is probably the case. Like, it's objectively true, right? There's a difference between if your starting lineup is good and let's say you get a recommendation from the analyst or the data department. It's like, hey, this is good, but we think if you put this guy in the starting lineup, our numbers show it should be way better. That's different if you reject that, right? That's a different thing. But when you have a failed starting lineup, and then you're just ignoring it, and the numbers keep telling you what the numbers are telling you, and you ignore it, 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 and you ignore it until you're down 0-2 in the conference finals, that's a problem. It's a problem. Like, and these are things that we saw throughout his time here. I mean, the smallest example, the one that I think people forget. Last year, you know, obviously we have all these injuries, but OG and Julius go out at the same time. His pivot is to put Precious Achiuwa into the starting lineup. So the starting lineup is Brunson, Dante, Precious, Isaiah Hartenstein. They play for a whole month. They're terrible. He finally takes Precious out, starts Deuce, and they go like 4-3 before OG comes back, whatever. But that lineup, that starting group, basically with Deuce instead of Precious, was like fucking awesome. They were really, really good in their minutes. And every combination with Deuce, Brunson, and Hart was great. Everyone, all of them. Like, their minutes together are fucking great. Okay, so we go to the playoffs. OG gets hurt in Game 2 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. What's his pivot? What is his starting lineup that he puts out in Game 3? He starts Precious. Starts Precious in Games 3 and 4. And it has these weird trickle-down effects that result in like stupid minutes with like Jericho Sims and Precious together and all this weird stuff. And yeah, like I'm not going to put it on Tom Thibodeau for not winning that series last year, because I think it is hard when you have the amount of injuries they had and things that cropped up in series. But you can look at that Game 3. That was their best shot to win that series, probably, because they go 3-0 there. They should have gone up 3-0 there. I think if they start Deuce, they win that game. And to be fair, look, they lost that game because Nembhard randomly hit a 3 out of his ass. But he starts Deuce in Game 5, and they light up the Pacers, right? They just smoked them. But you wasted 2 games in Indiana playing a lineup that you had a month's worth of minutes that told you that we're not good. They were not good. And you went back to it in the biggest games of your season. That stands out to me. That to me would be like not a fireable offense because I didn't want Tibbs fired after last year, but it's definitely one that if I'm in the front office, I'm like, red flag to me. And then this year, all the minutes, right? The Deuce minutes. I don't think Deuce McBride is some like all-star player. That's not why I think he should have played more or why I think the lineups with him are super effective. He just has a skill set that makes life easier for the better players on your team. And every lineup he's in speaks to that, not to him being the most important player in your team, but simply that he is the player or one of the players. I think Mitchell Robinson does this too. Players that help put your best players in situations where they're the most protected and they're the most supported. And I just think that not understanding those things is an issue. And I think that's always been an issue, and it's always been one of Tibbs' shortcomings as a head coach. I want to read, we need to get some comments here. Kenny Mears says, I think they're going to go big game hunting Jay Wright or Dan Hunley. I don't think they're hiring a first-time coach at this point, though I'd prefer that to a retread coach. Thoughts?
I always get scared of the college to NBA pipeline, even though there's a couple dudes who knock it out the park. I mean, Dan Hurley coaches in the NBA offense and defense in UConn, and he knows as much about the game as anyone. It's just the dynamics are so different in terms of just the personnel management, and I think that scares me the most about going after a college coach, because like we were saying with Tibbs, like you're not, this isn't hungry kids trying to make it. These are 100-millionaire adults, and Dan Hurley turning into the most intense human being in Manhattan is probably not the best way to get Jalen Brunson to hedge a little bit harder or whatever. Right. Or maybe it is. I have no fucking idea. I know that like Tibbs is, I know he gets, everybody's like, oh, look at Tibbs yelling on the sideline. But like, if anything, I think that Tibbs is kind of in the middle as far as like his personality. Like, I don't see Tibbs in a film session like yelling and shitting on any of these players. If anything, he's probably just pointing it out and just kind of doesn't know what to do from there, right? Like we've seen the Knicks have to utilize other players and other coaches to get through to their players through Tibbs' tenure, right? Whether that's Johnny Bryant, whether that's Jalen himself, whether that's other players. So in terms of what kind of personality can motivate these players, I don't know, but based on nothing more than my gut, I would not entrust that responsibility to the genre of coach who is of the general motivating his young soldiers type archetype, So, and I don't even know what Jay Wright, he just feels too like, I know he's like a vampire and he looks the same, but like he feels like he's just a little too out the game.
Adam Feeney with the super chat, thank you. Leon gave Omar a belated wedding present. What a guy! If you're in our Discord, you understand that. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. The college coach thing is always weird to me. I don't. It's not. It can work, obviously. Brad Stevens worked, right? Like he was awesome when he came into the league.
Even Billy Donovan has turned out like fine in time. It's just like it took a while for him.
Well, Donovan's also weird because he got hired to that OKC team, and it was immediately like you talk about championship expectations. That was like, not only did they have championship expectations, he had to coach the final year KD was in OKC. So you had that entire thing like looming over the entire season where you're like, oh yeah, we have to win a championship. Also, if you don't win a championship, Kevin Durant is definitely leaving probably. No pressure, buddy.
That's so insane in retrospect. Holy fuck.
Yeah.
I think the college thing's weird. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Stacey.
With Hurley too. So I'm, this biased thing that I'm picking up, but I remember when the Cavaliers hired John Beilein, and that was pretty much a disaster, even though he had a ton of success as a college coach. And if you remember, he really worked well with especially under-recruited college players because he focused on fundamentals and all of that. And when to the point that you were making earlier, Prez, with Tibbs, it's these guys have been veterans for many years. They're not going to want to focus on catching the ball with two hands and getting 2 feet in the paint and all of that. And so, if Hurley himself, I don't want to. I'm not in the locker room, obviously. I don't watch UConn day to day. You have seen some of these. This is a guy with a bit of a temper. We've seen him go after the refs. It could rub players the wrong way. In that sense, I do think that's less of a risk, obviously, than with Wright, who obviously knows several of these players quite well. I do think that that's a good perspective to have, though. It's the guy has literally never coached an NBA game, and you're not handing him, a minivan or you're handing him the keys to a Ferrari right now. So I think with the college coach thing, it probably would have made a little bit more sense for Hurley to go to a place maybe like LA, or the expectations are immediate and just like they were in Oklahoma City. There's a little more stability. Let's while we're kind of talking about this, the other extreme is to go with a seasoned coach. There is one who people have drawn similarities to Tibbs. It's been reiterated multiple times last week that Malone isn't a candidate. Prez, I know you're not thrilled with that. Do you think they will give serious consideration to Mike Malone, or should?
I have no idea. I mean, or whether they should. I personally, Malone breaks my brain as a coach, mostly because I'm a scaredy cat and a coward. Because he has some Tibbsian tendencies in terms of not staggering, in terms of stacking the deck against young players who are ready to contribute, not even rookies, but young players, right? These are things that he's done regularly over the years, where they have exceptions. Christian Brown got, run early in his career. But generally, those are the trends with him. And then on a more macro level, I don't know how. I know he coached in Sacramento before, but I don't know. We don't have Nikola Jokic. I don't know how to trust a coach. And this is absolutely unfair to Mike Malone, but I don't know how to trust that he would maximize a team without Nikola Jokic, because Nikola's his own alpha and omega force. So
he has Towns.
From that perspective,
He has Towns, though.
Towns is right. Towns is as talented as any big who is not Nikola Jokic, but he is not Nikola Jokic. So Nikola Jokic just solved so many problems that you could ever come up with by himself on offense. Literally more than any other player of the last 20 years outside of LeBron James, just purely on offense. Whereas where you don't really have the most impressive thing Malone has done is how he built the defense around Nikola Jokic, to me, which is a big deal, and he should get credit for that. But it's not my current top concern, because our personnel for defense is actually pretty fucking straightforward. It's okay, we shouldn't play deep drop. We should switch a lot. It's all the shit that Tibbs finally tried to do in the playoffs, and we did with varying degrees of success. That's enough to get you to mostly get the most out of these guys. Maybe move Mikal off ball a little bit more and play Deuce on ball a little bit more, or Josh on ball a little bit more. But the defensive optimization stuff is actually not nearly as difficult to me as the offense, because we have so many gifted players on offense and you can do different things with them. So there actually are lots of opportunity costs that you might risk when you choose this offense or that offense. And that's a really long way of saying maybe they pick Mike Malone. Whoever they pick, I will have confidence in, because the fact that they made this decision this quickly means they have a vision of some sort that departs from Tibbs's vision. And if they pick Mike Malone, then I'm going to assume that Mike Malone's in alignment with that vision. So from that perspective, if they pick him, cool. I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other, outside of just being a coward.
The thing with Malone is, I think he's good. I think he's a good coach. I also think that there's a lot of similarities between him and Thibodeau. So if you fired Thibodeau, you would need to really I would need to understand what specifically the reasons were to fire him and why you think that would be different with Malone. I think Malone's more willing to experiment with non-traditional lineups, right? Like when they won the championship, he used Aaron Gordon effectively as the backup 5 when Jokic sat, stuff like that. But he has a lot of the same boomer type tendencies that we associate with Tibbs. So that would be a very curious appointment. And quite honestly, I don't see it. I don't think they'll hire Mike Malone.
Is there we should get to some more super chats. Is there a dark horse or someone that maybe has been getting a lot of talk? I know none of us really are following assistant coaches in the NBA like that. Curious if you guys have someone. I think the main candidates, we've heard of them, right? Like people mentioned Hurley. I brought up Wright. I don't know how seriously he'd be a candidate. Malone. There are a couple of other fired coaches. Is there someone who has been mentioned that you're thinking that this actually would make a lot of sense?
I won't say a specific name, but I'll say what you usually see trend-wise in the NBA is assistants on whatever teams are killing it right now. So I would look at the assistants on the Cavs, including Johnny. I would look at the assistants on the Pacers, the assistants on the Thunder, the teams that are doing innovative things that have buy-in from their players. So I would start with those teams. I would not look at the teams that got far with levels of dysfunction. So the Knicks, the Nuggets, the Grizzlies, the Lakers, but all the other teams that seem to ride into the playoffs with a level of momentum, I would look at those assistants. I would not be surprised if we start hearing some of those assistants in demand. And then the other kind of bucket of assistants are more what you were alluding to before, which is like guys who have already been making the rounds for assistant for promotions or jobs for a while now. Like I forget, there's a guy, one of the Boston assistants kind of fits that mold where he's.
There's also like Cassell, a guy who's been rumored for a long time to be, like a coach in waiting, right? Something like that.
Yeah, although I feel like that kind of mold of coaching candidate is even rarer now, where it's like if you're an OG who's like been a coaching and waiting and time kind of passes your opportunities by. There's so many with the NBA, with teams being more open towards young candidates and teams being more open towards candidates from outside of the United States as well. Right, like Lusolo and Jordy and all these guys, right? Like it's a lot harder to be just like the Patrick Ewing or the Sam Cassell or even the Jeff Van Gundy, right? So I would probably bet a little bit against that.
Yeah, I could see that. Get some more comments here. Stanley Mann says a lot of good head coaching candidates are out there, like Vogel, Budenholzer, Bryant, Malone. Too bad Udoka's not available. Maybe Jay Wright or Chris Quinn. He also says Mark Jackson will be interviewed. What about the St. John's coach? I doubt Mark Jackson will be interviewed. The St. John's coach is Rick Pitino. Pitino's a great college coach. He's not had much success in the NBA. I know he coached the Knicks in the 80s, the Bomb Squad and
stuff. He wasn't that bad with the Knicks, though, right? They had some success, didn't they?
They had some success, but it's like you're talking about in the 80s. Like, late 80s, early 90s, right? Like, I don't know what you're...
It's hard. Yeah, he's very old. He is extremely old and has been out of the NBA for a while.
Yeah, I don't think that would be the direction to go in. I don't know enough about any of like the... My cards on the table, I think it'll be Johnny Bryant. That's what I think. I think
you think it matters that it happened right after the Suns. He talked about being on the Suns job. Do you think that accelerated things?
It might have, but I think like that. It was to me. it was pretty obvious when they added Johnny Bryant to the initial staff that he was kind of like the fail-safe plan, right? It's like, all right, Tibbs is our guy, but if Tibbs doesn't work, we're going to have Johnny waiting in the wings. So if we want to make a change, we can always go that way. And to Tibbs's credit, he performed so well for those first 4 years that he got extended. And then Johnny Bryant was like, all right, well, it's probably not going to happen for me here. Let me go somewhere else. Went to Cleveland. Obviously, they had a good season, even though it ended very poorly for them. He parlayed that into coaching interviews. He's been interviewed before. I think he was a finalist for a couple of jobs before. He's a finalist right now for the Suns job. It was rumored that it was going to be between him and I don't remember the other guy, Chris Ott, who's also an assistant on the Cavs, which is kind of funny. So that was like they're deciding between. But I don't know. I like it doesn't seem likely to me that they fired Tibbs because Johnny Bryant might be a finalist. I think if they fired Tibbs, it's because they ultimately concluded like you've taken us as far as you can. And there must have been some irreconcilable differences, feelings, whatnot, between the front office and Tibbs. That's what I think. I truly
is this like
believe
Tony moving Uncle Junior out of the way?
Yes. No, I just think it's like I don't think they would have just fired him outright if without some conversation about plans moving forward. And my impression is they probably did not get the concessions that they wanted from him as far as how they wanted things to be done in game with his coaching staff, whatever, moving forward. And that was a problem, I guess, and one that they could not overcome. Kenny Mears says, everyone talks about game one, but the irony of the series is if Tibbs didn't rest JB to start the fourth, they probably win that game. Plays JB whole halves versus Charlotte in January, but rested JB in a must-win game. Yeah, it was pretty weird. I thought that a lot of that stuff was weird. Sorry, try to get to some more here. Macon says there's literally no argument to keep Tibbs after the season besides the Knicks were horrible before him, and it means absolutely nothing. Every journal trying to say that this is reckless wasn't paying attention. What do you think about that, Stacey?
You know who else they were horrible before? Leon Rose, right? They introduced two things, right? And yeah, both of them happened at the same time. Together, they had great success. From the macro, it is like, so that is, it's nonsense. I think someone on Twitter responded and they were like, it's annoying how everyone viewing this is like, well, the Knicks were shitty with Phil Jackson 10 years ago. It has no bearing anymore, right? The Warriors were a pathetic franchise for 20 years until they weren't. So it's absurd. Yes, Tibbs was a big part of it. So was smart management, right? So was, smart draft moves, smart asset management. So was Leon Rose being able to sign the biggest star the Knicks have had, who has been as great as you can imagine to very reasonable deals. The biggest star they've had since Ewing, easily, right? And anyone who disagrees with that at this point, I'm sorry, then I can't. So I think look, I understand people, I feel bad for Tibbs, right? I would have loved, especially what he gave this roster, or gave this team and this organization, I would love to see him be there to see the final product if they win a championship, right? It'll be a little bit bittersweet. But you have to evaluate, are they one, I think they were horrible before him, it has no relevance, right? Because they didn't just have him take over the same roster. They revamped the roster and continue to improve it. It's not like he took over Tony Douglas, Langston Galloway, and fucking Jason Smith or whatever, and turned that into a winning team, right? He had help. And so what is this roster going to need going forward? The other thing I've seen is like, well, they're a fundamentally flawed roster. Again, they just were 2 games away from the finals. they were 2 games away from the finals on a team that, you know, a lot of the times was just, hey, Brunson, be great. A team that wasn't always playing the right lineups, a team that the tactical shifts that they needed and tried in the playoffs, they hadn't prepared in the regular season as much. Even if you don't want to talk about any of that, if you believe this is a fundamentally flawed roster, you should at least see it get maximized. Because I think most of the same very smart capital V, capital S national media folks saying that this is a flawed, fundamentally irredeemable roster would also have to acknowledge that they weren't playing the lineups that actually would even get the most out of that. So if you want to verify that theory, it's worth experimenting. And I think those same journalists would say, well, yeah, they don't really have much leeway, right? They traded 5 picks for Bridges. Where do you pivot? You can trade Cat, but you're probably going lateral at best for more depth. So I don't think there's easy fixes. Now, if they want to say, well, then Tibbs is being scapegoated for Rose trading for Bridges or something, that's fine. And if they lose, that will probably be his fate too. It's on his ass too now. But like that comment, right? They haven't been good for 20 years before I got here. Sure, it's not the same. It's a different front office, different team right now. Like what happened when fucking Grunfeld or Steve Mills was president has no bearing on this team right now and how you're judging it. It's an absolute absurd take that nevertheless seems very popular right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as far as like, did Tibbs deserve to be fired, or was there any case for him not to be fired? I think there's a case for him not to be fired because I think getting buy-in and getting guys to play hard and stuff like that, I think is underrated. This team was not as cohesive as previous teams under Tibbs had been in New York, so I think that was a sign of concern for sure. And I do think it matters that Brunson still seemed to be fully behind Tibbs. I think the fact that he does have a good, like that they know that that there is a relationship between him and Leon and stuff like that. I think that is important. But it did feel to me throughout the year that it was less like what record did he set this year? Where he passed Pat Riley, right? For most wins as a Knicks head coach or something.
Yeah.
And there was just such little fanfare about that from the organization, which I thought was very interesting. I didn't even know he was about to pass Pat Riley until he did it. And they like talked about it on MSG in the post game. And I just thought that was very interesting because it feels like that's something that you would want to celebrate, right? Like that would be like a very kind of front and center thing that you celebrate. And there just wasn't much of that. So I thought that was very interesting. I thought that was interesting. We obviously know that the team itself did not feel as cohesive. We know the issues that kind of leaked out into the public with Mikal Bridges' comments and stuff like that. We saw stuff on the bench, right, during that Lakers game where Josh Hart and Tibbs were yelling at each other. I don't actually think that shit's a big deal for the record, like players yelling at each other, coach getting on a player.
What does this do? What do you think this says about Brunson? Gave him a very strong vote of confidence in his final press conference, right? More confident than ever, blah, 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 all of that. Do you think Brunson is maybe not on board with this? Or do you think that maybe behind closed doors, he was more critical?
I think I have no idea how this works. I don't know how the conversation and any of that stuff goes. I have a tough time believing he was totally caught off guard by this decision. I don't know if he told them behind closed doors, hey, actually, look, I'm cool with Tibbs, but I understand that there's a lot of issues. I get that. But and maybe he's not a fan. Maybe he's mad about it. At the end of the day, Leon Rose's job is not to just like do what Jalen Brunson wants. And it matters that he's not just accountable to Jalen Brunson, right? He's accountable. Well, first of all, he's accountable to ownership. So he has to make these decisions and justify them to James Dolan. But he's also accountable to the other players on the team and to the fans. And, the fans or whatever, like we're going to be here no matter what. But I don't think like people can talk about it all they want. The fan complaints during the season were not stupid as much as Frank Isola wants to pretend they were. Because yeah, are there people that had dumb complaints? Sure. But I think a lot of the complaints were just like, hey, this group should be better. Look at all these numbers that kind of are not where they should be. Look at this lineup is bad that he keeps using. Look at these things that are alternatives that are good that he doesn't try. Like, there were a lot of valid arguments and criticisms to be made there. Fans universally were not stupid about some of the kind of angst around what was going on with the team. And as far as the players are concerned, like, again, I just felt throughout the season, it felt like there were less and less guys that were truly behind Tom Thibodeau. I think a lot of the comebacks they made, a lot of the fortitude they showed in the postseason was a credit to them. And yeah, it's a credit to the coaching staff too. But I think it was a credit to their professionalism, the professionalism of the coaches, the professionalism of the players, where it's like, hey, like whatever our issues are behind the scenes and whatnot, we're here to win basketball games. So we're going to put our best foot forward and we're going to do the best we can do to win these basketball games. And they showed a lot of mental fortitude and professionalism in doing so. But that doesn't mean that they were like all fully behind him. That just means that they got the fuck over it. And maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you don't need to be playing for the coach. Maybe that's an overrated element. But I do think there's part of that there where guys were not happy. I think it's very evident that, I mean, very specifically, I think Mikal and OG Anunoby were definitely not happy in their roles. I definitely believe that. I do not think those guys were happy in their roles. I think that I thought there was other interesting comments. There was a comment, I forgot what series it was. Might have been the Boston series, where they asked Cat about why he wasn't getting more threes up. And he said something along the lines of, I'm just doing what the game plan asked me to do. And I'm just trying to do that to the best of my ability, something along those lines. And they asked Tom Thibodeau about it. He said something about how, Cat just needs to like find ways to involve himself offensively and find the ball and make himself like it was something along those lines. But I just thought those all were like very interesting comments because it was a coach saying it's on the player to kind of like figure it out. And the player is saying, hey, I'm just doing what the coach wants me to do. So I don't know. I thought that was like not super, I don't know how to put it. It just didn't feel aligned. It did not feel like they were on the same page there.
I think the Deuce quote was even more telling, right?
Yeah.
It could have been about Cat. He said things were exposed, right? So that could be, I mean, I'm sure there is frustration towards Cat too, from OG, Mikal, Deuce. But we know Deuce is a guy who's, by the way, up for an extension, as you mentioned a bunch of times, next season. He's on on one of the best contracts in the league for the Knicks, but probably one of the more underpaid players given his skill set. He's a year away. And look, we can go there too. He is not the first young player who's had angst about that on the Knicks. You talk about Quickly. Now, Quickly got paid, and so that didn't work. But he wasn't getting played that much, and perhaps the Knicks could have even maximized his value even more when he was here, right? We know that Obi Toppin they traded, and look, people are talking about Obi Toppin didn't swing that series or anything, but he is a viable bench player for the Pacers who can give you 15 to 20 minutes in a playoff game. The Knicks basically had to trade him for 2 second-round picks. They probably could have gotten a little bit more. I think they wanted to do right by him. That's another player who wasn't getting many minutes. Grimes, right? I know you're not a Quentin Grimes fan, Schwim. I think he would have been a very useful player on this team if they could have somehow held on to him, right? A point of attack defender who can get threes up. There are other issues there, but that was another guy who was frustrated with his role. So this isn't new. I think the star players have always, have been happy. And that started to change a little bit this year too. So I think that this to me feels like the most where there's professionalism, and this was never going to be a situation where the team just fell apart internally or you had huge drama. They did have players only meetings. There does seem to be a little bit of a disconnect, more so than the rest of the other years. And I think the rest of the other years, the guys they had, even if they weren't thrilled with their roles, were committed to it, right? Quickly never badmouthed Tibbs in public. He's spoken very highly of him. Even Grimes has, right? So I think during those times, for whatever reason, the roster I think was made up of more role players or young players and a star, right? Really one star, and then you had Brunson and Randall, but those were very clearly delineated. Bridges and OG are a little bit in that they're role players, but they're high-end role players on lucrative contracts with a lot of experience, right? And so your goals are bigger now. Your goals are not just to compete every night. Your goals are to win a championship. I think they're all cognizant of it, and they all know that the scrutiny is going to come on them. And it just, there seemed to be more of a disconnect between Tibbs and the rest of the team than I think there ever had been. I think most of the other years you would actually say it was a strength for him.
Yeah. This is from Kenny. DJ Zullo from KFS, who seems to have some connections to UConn. Hurley tweeted essentially Hurley's interest in the job. He's the guy I've wanted for a while. I don't watch college basketball. Stacey, you're a UConn guy, so you can speak to this. And I know you touched on it a little bit earlier. All I know about Hurley is he's a very strong personality. But his offenses are great. I mean, they're really, really good from what I've seen. There's a lot of motion. There's a lot of layered sets, right? When I watch them, at least, it seems like they get into like the first action, the second action, they have third actions. Like they get into a lot of different stuff in the half court. But the personality thing with him is probably, and from what I've heard is like, aren't his like practices like fucking crazy in college too? So I wonder about those things, how that all translates to the NBA.
Yeah, and I brought up Beeline before. I think the same thing. So I do want to tweet. DJ tweeted, the same people that felt confident Hurley would turn down the Lakers do not share that same optimism should the Knicks come calling, which tells you that somebody believes he would listen. Dan Hurley, for those who don't know, is also a Jersey City native. So I don't know if he grew up a Knicks fan or anything, but there's clearly some history there. I think that would be the worry that you suggested, Schwinn. It would be my top worry, right? Is he going to be able to tailor his personality to deal with millions of dollars of egos? I know he's dealt with 5-star recruits, but this is another level. I do wonder if he will be able to adapt to Cat playing heavy minutes at the 5. UConn is typically, from what I've seen, featured guys like Klingon, featured guys that are like really strong rim protectors. But his offenses have been dynamic. I think that, again, I think it's just also like getting guys on the same page, comfortable in kind of those dynamic situations. Because if you look at that Pacers series, the Knicks did try more ball movement. They tried more. They tried to push the ball. They tried to look for the pass instead of just getting to the foul line. And it led to a huge increase in turnovers from everyone. Even Brunson had a huge increase in turnovers. So it's a guy who can build that in be patient and build that during the regular season instead of just trying to simplify everything. I think he gives you those things. I think if LeBron clearly signed off on it, right? So if he was not worried about that, I wonder how much that speaks to him. I'm sure he has good relationships as a result. I do think that given the stakes, they probably don't go for they probably don't go the college route. I think they'd be more comfortable with a guy like Johnny Bryant. But it's for Bryant, you can say your name is in the paper every day, right? You see this in Remember the Titans. An assistant coach's name is never in the paper for losing a game. It's the head coach. Brian is going to have to adapt to that. And not everyone has had a smooth transition with that. So Hurley gives you the thing where he has been the guy, the accountable guy. He's had to be responsible for the whole roster. He's had to be responsible for talent evaluation, right? These are essentially GMs in college because they're in charge of recruiting. How do you weigh that against the guy with more direct NBA experience, who's had experience with these players, and who's kind of immersed in the NBA and the game's evolution as it is? I think that's interesting. I still would give probably Brian an edge, but Hurley clearly has some connection, and he was a really hot candidate last year. So,
yeah, the Hurley thing is just I don't know what to make of it. Like, I think it would be interesting, and I'm certain he has interest in the job, just from everything that was reported at the time last year when he kind of turned down the Lakers, and then all that. But it's a real risk. And you don't know how his personality will take to the NBA, right? That's really the main thing for me. And also, like, this is not, I think it'd be different if this was a young team. If this was a team that's like, hey, we've got a bunch of nice, young, interesting, developing players that need to be shaped and molded. and need that initial guidance and push, I think that'd be a different scenario. But when you're talking about a team that has a bunch of established pros, I don't know. The Hurley thing would be certainly an interesting risk to say the least. Sorry, just trying to move on here. Stanley Mann says, I don't agree Josh Hart was calling out Cat when he talked about selfish, ego-driven players. Same with Deuce's comments after the Pacers loss. It's clear Tibbs lost the locker room. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that Deuce comment was about. I think there's multiple ways to look at it, but at the end of it, like the sentiment, right, is ultimately that there were things the Knicks did all year which were inevitably not going to lead to success, and they kept doing those, like they never addressed those things. That's it. That's ultimately the sentiment. So whichever way you want, whoever you want to blame that, or whoever you want to blame for that, it's what it is. So yeah, I mean, I agree. It's a little bit more complex than that. I just have to read this. Delali Y, too much profanity. I'm out. Should probably never listen to this podcast ever again. Just FYI.
I think we've been low on profanity today. I think.
Yeah, I don't think we've cursed much at all. Maybe we need to step it up. Age 22 says no more fucking Mo Cheeks on my team's coaching staff. The Mo Cheeks thing is just like it's not even that any of these guys is bad. It's just that it was such an uninspiring staff in so many ways, especially when you're like, you know, how many of these guys are going to get a head coaching interview, right? Anybody?
Well, if a team wants Jalen Brunson, one of them, right?
Rick Brunson, yeah, maybe.
Well, do you think the new coach keeps him?
I don't know. Maybe. It's just I don't know. I could see it. It wouldn't be the biggest thing in the world. He certainly wouldn't be the lead assistant anymore. Is that something that he's okay with? I don't know. You know, I think there are certain guys on the staff that are good. Like, I think Mark Bryan, that's a big man coach. I think he's done a pretty good job.
There's Dice too, right?
Well. Dice seems like he's done a decent job. Otello Harrington seems like he probably did a better job as a coach with the Knicks than he did as a player. But yeah, like the staff in general just doesn't seem. It just seems like they need a new blood on. They need a new blood there. So again, like, hey, Tibbs, we want to kind of shake up the coaching staff. Is that something he was okay with? If he wasn't, then you know it just kind of becomes tough to negotiate a middle ground there. Sorry, still trying to get to as many of these as we can. Retro, it is the best coaching job in a while. Usually when teams fire their coach, they're going to be awful or desperate to be middling. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? If they're awful, that takes some pressure off the coach, right? But it also doesn't speak to the front office being able to build that team out. We've seen this front office continue to improve the team. I disagree with people who say the roster was better last year. But I think even if you thought it was, I think even if you say this roster, this was a lateral year, they didn't really improve on last year. Well, there's a lot of reasons they should have been worse. Hartenstein left for nothing. There's nothing they can do about that. They essentially lost Mitchell Robinson because of injury for most of the year. So now you're down 2 centers, right? You have to worry about paying Randall. And they pivoted and they got Cat, who could solve both of those problems to some extent, right? And you know, the Bridges trade is its own thing. We'll have to give it time. But if you look back to last year, they really did struggle with defense. And, you know, Dante was a tough loss, but they lost because, you know, their defense couldn't hang with the Pacers. I really don't think Dante DiVincenzo, based on how he looked against them last year, was going to fix that. So they pivoted in a tough situation, even if you discount the fact that they actually advanced. They won one more game. They advanced farther in the playoffs. You say, well, they had health and all that. Fine. But it's not like it was, you know, there were things against them that out of their control that made even staying at that same level kind of difficult. So I agree that this front office has proven its capability. You have a talented roster. and you don't have to go through tanking. Which, if you're a competitive enough person to be an NBA coach, I don't think you really want to be coaching a tanking roster and saying, "But hey, at least I have job security." Right?
So, I think I'm not sure where he said it, but apparently CP, the franchise of KFTV, he said that the confusion about player roles was one of the main issues and themes all year that they brought up in the players only meetings, or they're not the players only meetings, the exit meetings. Sorry. Apparently, also Dolan was in the exit meetings, so he was a part of this decision making process. Kenny Mears says, I feel like a lot of people assume this means that we're more likely we run it back. I really think they will take another big swing this summer. Leon, since OG trade is all in. I don't know that it means that they're going to run it back. I think it is more likely. And I think that if there's a trade for Giannis that's available, they would pull that trigger, obviously.
Or Kevin Durant, right?
No, not Kevin Durant. But
if you didn't think there was if you thought there was too much profanity right now, the Knicks somehow got Kevin Durant. I think the FCC might give us a call. Sorry, go ahead.
I think Strickland might need to look for a new podcast host then. But I just think that if it's not Giannis, I don't think there's a big move that appeals to them. Maybe that changes. Maybe guys become available that I'm not even thinking will be available. I just don't see it. But I also wonder if, like, what if you want a guy like Chris Paul or like Al Horford or something, right? An older veteran that you think could help out this roster next year. And those guys are interested. But maybe they're looking at it and they're like, I don't really want to play for Tom Thibodeau. Maybe that's something that's true. I don't know it is, by the way. I could be wrong. Maybe they had no problem with Tom Thibodeau. I generally found a lot of the, like, guys don't want to play for Tibbs things somewhat bullshit, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Is that playing to your consideration in this decision? And would you constitute those as big moves? I don't know if those are big moves, but I do think those two guys are pretty interesting as veteran additions to this team, because I do think they provide some of the voice in the locker room type of stuff that this group probably needs. And they both seem to be able to still play and address some needs that we have. So that's interesting. Schwinn, there are no parameters for Tibbs. He is who he is, the good and the bad. If you want to pivot to modern offense, you fire Tibbs, not put a leash on him. That's fair. I just think that, and maybe this is like my sentimentality or something, I just think that with the job he ultimately, like how far he took them this year and the totality of his time here, I would have been okay bringing him back under those specific parameters. But if he wasn't game to those parameters, then it doesn't really matter. Then I would have moved on from him. So, yeah. Billy Reinhart said Leon Rose is scapegoating Tibbs. That's really good for Billy Reinhart. I know that the Nets have never fired a head coach ever in their illustrious franchise history. So, too. Sorry, trying to keep going here. Schwinn, my fellow Bills fan, this is what Buffalo should be doing with McDermott. I think that they will be doing that with McDermott if he does not get it done this year. I'll tell you that much. Ace Bouchard, I think that the most easily identified issues with this year's team is that despite the personnel changes made last offseason, not much change from the offense or defense worked from last season. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a straight drop only team, which, by the way, was showing some issues last year against teams with stretch bigs.
I mean, it was terrible in the playoffs.
Yeah, and again, two stretch bigs, Embiid and Turner. Siakam killed us last year. There wasn't a whole lot of adjustment to that. And yeah, I think we talked about this, right? This is a team built. This is a team built to win with offense and have enough defense. This is a team built to go 5 out and sometimes play cat at the 4. And we never committed to that, right? This is a team that's not. I think you talked about this before, Schwinn, right? Like we're Tibbs. It's not that he leans any one way, but he's like, we need like a baseline average, enough of each of the different things. We need just enough rebounding, we need enough passing, we need enough creation, we need enough shooting. And this is a thing where you kind of have to play the way this roster is built. And I think the way that every roster is going to be built going forward, you're going to have to play to certain extremes, and you have to do some things you're uncomfortable with, right? Look at the Pacers, right? They are going to have to, they're not always putting out 5 great defenders. Nembhard got torched until Game 6. I think that a loose whistle helped him. Halliburton is not a great defender. Turner struggles in space, right? But they figure it out, right? And they're willing to play guys like Jarris Walker, deep bench guys, right? Obi has his defensive limitations, but he plays them with Halliburton, right? You have to be strategic about that. You have to adapt to the roster you have. And Tibbs, I think, still wanted to coach a team as if he had a rim protector. He's going to have focus on paint pressure more than anything else, getting to the line and limiting turnovers. And when that became not an option, and I do think he recognized that, and they pushed the pace more. And when they didn't go double big, they even when they were going double big, they did switch more. But it was too little, too late. Or you hadn't really built those reps in during the regular season. You hadn't prepared for being versatile. You'd prepared for playing one way. That's kind of what happened on both sides, right? So,
yeah, I can't say I disagree at all. That's what it is. It was, yeah, he was coaching a team that he wished he had versus the team that he actually had. And if that,
and this isn't the first time we're saying that, right? He didn't want to play quickly with Brunson, he didn't want to start quickly over Elfrid Payton. He didn't want to start quickly next to Burks or in place of Burks, right? He didn't want to try going too big with Obi and Randall ever. He didn't want to play Brunson with quickly. He didn't want to play Brunson with Deuce. He was hesitant to play too big until late in the playoffs. He didn't want to trust Huckporty, even when Precious was really struggling, even when there were really opportunities when they're not winning this game or they're struggling on the court to try something new in the regular season. You want to do that. So, if you have to play one way all the time, it's just, you have to be able to win many different ways. And I think the great coaches are all capable of that.
Yeah. Kofi Amankwa Jr. Knicks Fan TV CP said that the players' exit interviews had most of them say they didn't know their roles, and that played a factor. Ian Begley also semi-confirmed that the top player said that. Yeah. If there's mass confusion of what player roles are, and your best guys are telling you they don't know what their roles are, that's a problem. Oh, God. Jesus. Here we go.
Gentlemen, how's it going?
It's great. Doing great. We were doing great.
What a great day.
I will say, Tyrese, last time I saw you, it was the rundown, and you and Drew were both pretty confident this could happen. And I think I did say I expected him to be back. So you were right. I was wrong. Welcome to the show.
What is that in Billy Madison where he's like,
I was gonna go there, but
you were right. I
was wrong. You're very good looking. I'm not attractive.
So I did several miles above the speed limit to get here.
What's Texas? They have laws there?
Basically not.
Only for you though. Like, actually, me, you, Stacy, we have laws.
That's fair. That's fair. But Jesus Christ, I said I wanted it to happen on the rundown down. I didn't think it would happen, just given the fact that I thought they would say, well, it's been the best team in basically this millennium for the Knicks, and they did it. I'm surprised that they did it. I'm glad that they did it. I'm happy that they did it. There are people who are like, oh, thank you, Tibbs. Thank you. Oh my God. Fuck that. Fuck that. I don't want to hear shit about, oh my God, I'm so grateful. Like, I'm not going to keep the white man like that. Come on now. Like, come on. Can we have some decorum, please? Can we act like we've been here before? Oh my God, it's 20 years of futility, and Tom Thibodeau is the reason why we got out of the trenches. Fuck that. Okay? The reason why we got out of the trenches is the 6'2" and thick dude that's our point guard. Okay? I don't want to hear shit about, oh, Tom Thibodeau is.
So you really turned around on Deuce, huh?
I said 6'2" thick and point guard. Do you think?
Yeah, that's Deuce.
Deuce is not thick unless you're talking
Brunson
about his hair. Whatever. It says 6'2" on Basketball Reference. I'm gonna go with 6'2" right there. Anyway, please I don't want to hear shit about, oh my God, Tom Thibodeau. Tom Thibodeau's been basically coasting on the talent of the roster since 22. Like, I don't want to hear shit, dude. Jalen Brunson needs to be thanked for Tom Thibodeau. Jalen Brunson needs to be thanked for Tom Thibodeau getting $33 million guaranteed that he did not deserve. Jalen Brunson needs to be thanked for the fact that this roster made it as far as it did, because there was no reason why, given the schemes that he played, the offense that he ran, and the amount of coaching that he's able to do for this roster, he should not have made it this far. He should not have been coaching this roster in 2025. He shouldn't have been coaching this roster in 2023. He should not have been coaching this roster in 2024. So I don't want to hear shit about, oh, Tom Thibodeau is the reason why the Knicks are back to relevancy. No, the reason why we're back to relevancy is because the roster is insanely talented. And when next season comes around and the Knicks win 60 games because they're not running Josh Hart out there like he's fucking Luol Deng, I don't want to hear shit about Tom Thibodeau anymore. I am flabbergasted that this is the response where we have to act like Tom Thibodeau is fucking manna from heaven, and Tom Thibodeau is the reason why this team's back to relevancy, and we have to gas up a Coach of the Year title he won 5 years ago against a more qualified black man and Monty Williams. I'm Steve A. Smithing right now. I don't care. Like, okay, cool. Like, after 21, 22, I was out. 22, 23, whatever. Like, they won, but like, we've seen the flaws of this dude for 5 years. So people who are like, oh, he should have gotten one more year. He should, like, when you get to the point where you're talking about one more year, offensive coordinator, relinquishing the offense, his seat is really warm. It's like, dude, at some point you just want to fire him, but you just want to make his feelings feel better. He's 67. I think he'll get over it. And if you won't, there's
a multi-millionaire, right?
Exactly. He's a multi-millionaire, and I'm pretty sure they make pretty good health care and nursing homes for him. He'll be fine. Okay? Like, the way he coached, man, early onset might be on the table. Anyway, I no, like, he did not deserve to be the coach of this team 3 years ago. And that 21-22 was an abject fucking failure. The way he coached the Pacers series last year was an abject failure after OG went down. There was just no desire to run the lineups that worked.
It's that Heat series. I actually don't even blame for the Pacers series. That Heat series, I think, was the lowest, worse than even this one, the Pacers series this year. I think that
yes,
Heat series should have won.
Yes, like, there's no way he decided that 4 non-shooters and Jalen Brunson and Shalom Ball was the way to go. But I saw it this year in the playoffs where it was basically 3 shooters, Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson. Please make some magic happen. Like, Tom Thibodeau will be fine. I think the people who haven't watched the Knicks all year are somehow, some way trying to make this seem like this is a sacrilegious offense that you could fire Tom Thibodeau. It's Tom Thibodeau. It's not Jesus Christ.
He is Jesus Christ to some people.
Yeah, to people who need to do. I'm not gonna say that. He's Jesus Christ to some people who really like to do content creation. Just get out of my face, man. Like, I'm so tired of the. Oh, before I start anything, thank you, Tiff. Fuck out of here. Where's your pride? Where's your pride? It's not like he's dying. He just got fired. And oh my God, if I got fired and I had $33 million waiting for me, I swear I would not be shedding a single tear. I wouldn't be shedding one.
Yeah. Knight of Cups, thank you for the super chat. Glass breaks. By God, it's Tyrese coming out with the steel chair.
I can't wait.
That was my JR. That was my JR impression.
Good JR. Good JR. I cannot wait to see this team actually play shooting lineups and actually be able to play lineups that work well and have a I can't wait to see the first time we run 2 actions in the same half court set. I swear to God, I might pass out. Like, he might run a flare screen and then we might run a flare screen into a DHO and I actually might faint. Like, the bar is in hell. Not only the bar is in hell, like, somehow, some way, he went lower than the bar. And we had to give him another chance to get it together and for gelling to happen, as if they did not play 2 years of rotation minutes with the same starting five that we knew didn't work since January. But we have to gel, and we have to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Yes. David Crockett, one thing is obvious. The roster believed in Tibbs less as the year went on. Mikal Bridges basically was out on Tibbs by January. And
when did he make those comments against Portland? That was February, right?
Yeah, February. And he's basically like, "Oh yeah, I didn't talk to Tibbs." Oh yeah, I think we should play the he was like, "Oh, I think we should play the bench more." Oh, I didn't talk.
Well, he said he talked. No, he said he talked to Tibbs, and then Tibbs was like, "We never talked about it." I was like, "Okay, seems bad."
Oh my god! And then people tried to make it seem like, "Oh, Mikal Bridges is soft." Dude, Mikal Bridges is playing 38 minutes a night for 82 games. As the point of attack defender with essentially nobody else helping him because the only other options are Josh Hart and OG Anunoby, who's already doing off-ball stuff. I don't want to hear about how Tom Thibodeau put people in the best position to succeed. They got by on the fact that the team is insanely talented and deep. And he did not want to utilize that until he absolutely had to. And Josh Hart basically had to tap him on the hand and say, "It's okay. You can bench me. You have to let me go, Jack." There is no way. No way. It took you.
You're saying that is in this scenario is Josh Hart Rose or is he Jack?
Yes.
He's Rose?
But no. Yeah, no, Josh Hart is Rose and
Tibbs is Jack. So he's just like, "Tibbs, you got to let me go, and you have to freeze yourself to death in the cold waters."
Well, it worked out. We got the ending that we wanted.
Can we not use the Titanic as an analogy for a team we want to see win also?
Well, he Titanic the postseason. I think it's fair.
I think that the main thing to me is just that last year's team is probably the closest, and it sucks. It actually does suck that they all got hurt because I think last year's team is probably the closest template of 9 guys that you could have had that could have I think he probably had a chance to win a championship with that team because that team was built to play exactly the way Tibbs wants to play basketball. They had everything that you wanted, right? You had the strong 4-man who can help create corner threes and all that stuff in Randall. Obviously, you get OG, lockdown wing defender, Dante, psycho 3-point shooter who doesn't need even plays drawn up for him half the time. You still had Jalen Brunson, and then your depth was really good, right? You had Josh, you had Deuce, you had Mitchell Robinson coming back. It was a team that was perfect for Tibbs, but we've talked about this over the summer. We talked about it ever since then. Once Isaiah Hartenstein did not come back, that team was dead. That roster construct was dead because Mitchell Robinson was not going to come back until February. You were dead then. So you had to find a different way to get a center and move pieces around. And to the front office's credit, they did that. They put together a roster with enough talent that even though I don't think, and none of us think Tibbs did a particularly strong job of maximizing it, that they were still able to get to a conference finals, right? They were still able to get that far in the postseason, even despite that. And they were favored in this conference final series. It's a series I still think they should have won. That's not even discrediting the Pacers. I just think the Knicks had more talent to beat them, and they fucked themselves constantly in this series. But some of the things, like the game 1 collapse, if you want to put that on Tibbs, that's fine. I wouldn't. I just think it's such a ridiculous collapse. Players have to own that.
But it's also he could have left Deuce.
No, right. I get that. But my point is even if you set it aside, fine. That one's not on him. You can't have watched these games and been they're winning because of awesome play design, system, spacing principles, whatever. And then within that, you're also watching them constantly leak points in transition. And some of that is sure, guys can give better effort in certain moments, but a lot of that is just because you have fucking 4 guys in the paint on offense. And as soon as you miss a shot, it's all right, we got 3 guys going. How hard is it at some point to be hey, whoever's Pascal Siakam is fucking running every single time. Every single time he's running to go, All right, like go play deep safety. It's just it was crazy, and I just think like when you see simple breakdowns like that, which by the way I think our good pal Hug Life on Twitter, he tweeted this, but he mentioned how like against Miami in 2023 we had similar issues where Kevin Love kept fucking dotting us with these full court passes for easy layups and stuff, and it's just like when you see that stuff, it's just I don't know, like I just don't know how people can. I can understand how you think he deserved another year. I get that. I don't get how you can watch all of this and be like, he got a raw deal. They fucking screwed him. He's a scapegoat. Like, that's just so fucking crazy to me.
Who could even argue he's a scapegoat? Like,
why don't you go search Tibbs scapegoat on Twitter right now? I'm sure you'll find a bunch of tweets.
I'm pretty sure they're all the same complexion, but I'm going to anyway. Anybody calling Tibbs a scapegoat is legitimately just like has not watched the Knicks all season. How do you play a negative lineup and get to the Eastern Conference Finals? It's blowing my mind. They basically started every game in a hole. I'm pretty sure like for this postseason they led like 30% of the time. Do you understand how crazy that is to like lead maybe 30-35% of the time in the postseason and make the Eastern Conference Finals and be 2 games away from a finals berth with a neutral point differential? Neutral. They scored 1972 points and they got scored against 1972 points. Like, this team legitimately got by on the fact that they're just insanely talented and were able to do just enough without being maximized, while playing bad lineups, without going deep into bench units, and just because like they have, again, 5 top 100 players and another guy coming off the bench who gave them another top 100 caliber impact. Like, yeah, anybody calling Tibbs the scapegoat, I wouldn't be surprised if they're on Tibbs's massive payroll, that he has more money and more opportunity to beef up now that he's unemployed. I love living in a world where I have a job and Top Thibodeau does it. Beautiful time.
So there is I don't know if you guys saw this tweet from Chris Persianen, but I do think
how crazy is that he doesn't have a job and he's still going to make more money than all of us combined.
I know, it sucks. We hate
capitalism. Not only he's owed $30 million, right? It's interesting. I did want to highlight note from friend of the pod, Chris Persianen, who essentially said that a big part of it was they wanted Tibbs to break his streak of never making a starting lineup change unless he's down in a series. That didn't happen, and that was a significant factor. So I do think that they obviously suggested, it sounds like they suggested Mitch. I don't know if Deuce had also been suggested to him. I actually think during the Indiana series, I would have preferred to see that even more than Mitch, at least against those starters. But definitely wanted to note that.
I saw that. I think it's interesting. I mean, it's also probably like, hey, can you just come to this fucking decision independently? Like that's what I think is probably a frustration. When it's like, do you really need us to tell you that the fucking bad starting lineup is bad and you should change it? Like, what the fuck are we talking about? Like, just make the change. It's not hard. This is a bad starting lineup. You're allowed to change it. Just because you're winning games doesn't mean you start the same lineup, right? Like, we saw this in his first year in New York. This is fundamentally his issue, is that for all the stuff he'll always say about net rating and all that shit, if the rotation he has set out continues to win games and win at a level that he deems as like more good than bad, then he will stick with it, even though there might be pieces of that rotation that could be improved upon. And that's what has always kind of held him back, I think, at various points, where it's like he will never put the best. He's never actually focused on putting the best version of his team out there. As he's more concerned with, the thing that I think works, right? Is that working? If it's working, no change is required. And as long as it works, he was fine with it. He didn't change it in the regular season. They never were that, and that's I think the point that Chris is driving home there, which is significant, is they were never behind the Detroit series, they were never behind the Celtics series, and then they finally did fall behind, and that's when he made the change, which tells you this is not a process-oriented decision that he's making. It's a results-oriented one, and a results-oriented coach, to me, will always put a ceiling on what you can truly achieve, because they're always working based on. They're not really working to optimize what they have. They're working towards, you're just basing their choices on the events that occur. And they're not really learning from them. They're not like, oh, well, we got away with it this time, but next time we need to be better prepared for it. No, it's just like, well, we got away with it this time, so let's keep going with it. Like it was not great from him, and I think it's ultimately his main weakness as a coach, because I think all the schematic stuff and whatever, that's fine. We can always talk about it, but playing your best lineups is like it's the most by far and away the most important thing you do as a coach. Like fucking Mike Malone and like David Adelman didn't do anything different from Mike Malone, really. Like he just was like, okay, well, Jokic do Jokic stuff and I'll play a bunch of zone, and that was it. That was like basically what they did to go 7 games with OKC. But yeah.
Yeah, I just think of a very common theme of this team was that they just did not have an identity. The roster and the coach did not agree schematically about what they wanted the team to be, and the coach was inflexible. You just cannot have those things with this roster specifically. Like he wanted Cat to be a drop big. He wanted Mikal Bridges to be a point of attack defender. He wanted this team to be a defense-oriented team, and it's like, no, their defense is their offense. It's their ability to score. He wanted them to focus on driving, and it did not make any sense to me, and I don't think it made any sense to the front office. And I think that's why we are here, liberated, free, and significantly better for it. Yes. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. This is from HB Greg. Ian Begley basically said, no to Wright, Malone, Jenkins, skeptical about Hurley, thinks Brian is under consideration, said you have to lean on who Core is going to be comfortable with, fits the guys. And then Adabombo at Ajobi said, Begley said key players were calling a meeting with Dolan in the front office. I wonder who those key players were. I think it's pretty obvious who the key players were. Probably all the starters, or the original starters, I
think you maybe Mitch and Deuce, but
yeah. I have to go. I don't know if you guys have anything else that you wanted to do before we get out of here.
Nope, I'm good.
that was quite a way to start the. What was your thing? Off-season appreciator or something?
Yes. I'm happy the offseason is here. I have no problem saying that. I wish they had won the series. I wish we were in the finals, but I do not mind that the season is over, because I think this team is infuriating and mind-boggling. And
This was a hell of a way to kick off the offseason.
Yeah, one way to kick off the offseason. All right. Thank you to everybody that joined us in the chat. Thank you for the super chats. Appreciate it. Tyrese, Stacy, I'll talk to you guys soon. We're out of here. I guess, I don't know, me and Stacy will have to record a pod at another time. So we'll do that. And we'll get the pod out for you at some point. All right. That is our show for today. Hope everybody has a great week. And I will see you when I see you. Peace.